All right, welcome back. So in this video, we're going to go through the very first step in a workflow, and that would be called the trigger. So what is the action that has to happen in order for your workflow to run? So for example, if you build a workflow that maybe it summarizes all the social media data and then it sends this data out to your employees, well, what's the trigger to that? What actually has to occur for that to happen? And we have a few different options here. So for this video, you don't have to follow along. You could just watch me do it. But in the future videos where we're actually building out workflows, I do recommend following along and building one with me just to help solidify your knowledge and experience using n8n. But let's jump into it. So let's open up our workflow editor. So if you remember, you hop over to n8n and then you click create new workflow. And then the very first thing we're going to do is click this plus icon. And this is where we'll be able to add our first step. So before we go any further, just a little FYI, if you're trying to navigate this, if you click the middle button on your cursor, you'll get this hand icon, and then you can kind of drag around the screen, or you can hold the control key on your keyboard and drag around as well. And you can zoom in and out with your scroll wheel if you're holding the control key. Otherwise, if you're not holding the control key, your scroll wheel will move the screen up and down. All right, so now that we have that out of the way, let's click on adding our first step. So click this plus icon here, and now we can see the list of trigger options on the right-hand side. So the very first trigger option would be a manual trigger. So if we click on this, this means that in order for this workflow to run, we would manually have to come over here and click execute workflow. So if we execute this, this would run the workflow. Of course, we don't have any steps, so it's not actually doing anything, but it did run this little workflow we have here. Now, if you notice, if I hover over this button, it says this workflow has no trigger nodes that require activation. And that's because if I ever want to run this workflow, I would have to just manually click execute this workflow every single time I want this to run. So there are use cases for manual workflows if there's not a need to run it on a schedule or to run it based on a different event that happens automatically. This is where manual workflows can come into play. So in this course, we're going to focus more on automatic workflows. So I'm going to right click this and delete it. And before you delete it, you could also delete up here. If you just hover over this, you'll see this little taskbar here. So I can click the trash can icon. There we go. Now our trigger is gone. Let's click on add first step again. And let's just go through a few of these other options. So this would run the flow if something else happened in another app. So if we click on this, we can see a bunch of different options here. I believe I just searched Google. We have all these Google options, and there's other categories here, Google Chat, Gemini, and so on. So maybe something happens where someone uploads a new file in Google Drive. Well, if we click on this, we could see the different options. So it looks like the only two trigger options would be changes to a specific file or changes involving a specific folder. So again, if we just click on one of these apps here, it would give us a list of possible triggers that we could use. So if I click this application called Airtable, it would say the only trigger here is on a new Airtable event. So if we wanted anything related to Airtable, this is the only trigger we have as an option. So now let's go all the way back and let's look at our other trigger options. So we have a scheduled trigger here. If I click on this, I can then set a trigger interval or a scheduled runtime for this workflow. So maybe if I want to click on this trigger interval and change this from days to hours, that means that I'm now looking at hours between the triggers. So maybe I want this workflow to run every 3 hours. And then if I want to specify a minute, I could do that, but I'm going to leave it blank. Now I could also add other rules to this trigger. So if I want to add a rule and say also trigger this every day, then I could do that. And I could trigger at a specific hour. So I could say every day at 7 a.m. So this flow would run every 3 hours, but it also run every day at 7 a.m. no matter what. So even if the flow last ran at like 6 a.m. or something like that, it would still run at 7 a.m. because of this additional rule. So it wouldn't just be every 3 hours, it would also be every day at 7 a.m. And you can just keep going. You can say, maybe I want this to also run maybe every month, and then you could trigger at the day of the month. So on the 15th of every month, and then I could trigger at a specific time as well, maybe 9 a.m. And now I have a flow that will run every month on the 15th of the month at 9 a.m. It will also run every day at 7 a.m. and it will also run every 3 hours. So again, this probably doesn't make too much sense. I have all these rules on a scheduled workflow. So maybe we just want to have this run every day at 7 a.m. That's probably more reasonable. So if I want to click execute step, it would just make sure that this is able to work correctly. So we can see that at 6:44 p.m. on a Sunday, this is when we ran this workflow. Let's head back to Canvas. And now we have our first trigger here. So we have a scheduled trigger. And then we could go ahead and add other actions if we wanted to. But we will worry about that in the next video. So let's right click on this, or we can click this icon up here. I'm just gonna right click, delete, whatever is easier for you. And now let's click on add first step again and go through some other triggers. You can do a webhook call if you want. Now that's a little more advanced, and this is just a complete beginner's course with no coding background. So feel free to explore that if you want. You could do an on-form submission. So think of like a Google form, but instead it's built in through n8n. So maybe someone fills out the form and then a workflow would run. You can also have your workflows call other workflows. So maybe another workflow would run, and then we'd specify this one to run after that one finishes. Other options, maybe an on-chat message. So if a user sends a chat message, then it would run as well. We also have this when running evaluation. So we could run a data set through a workflow. And there's a few other ways. Maybe if there is an error, we could have this workflow run instead. But let's keep it simple. Let's go back and let's just search, I don't know, let's say whenever we get a new email. So I'm going to search email. And I'm going to select Gmail. So clicking Gmail here, and then I can say on message received. And then right here, we have credentials. So this is where I would have to link my Gmail account to then set this up. So if I click select credential, create new credential, I can then sign in with Google right here. So I'm going to sign with my Gmail account, and then I can grant different permissions to n8n if I want to link my Gmail account. I'll just say select all, and I'll click continue. And there we go. I have linked my Gmail account. So now I'm going to click the X at the top right. And now that we have this credential, we can say how often should we pull our Gmail to check for new emails received. So I could do every X, and then I could specify it. So I could say every 1 minute, or I could do every 5 hours, something like that. But I'm going to click back on mode, and let's actually just do every minute. And we could also add a poll time if we wanted. So we could do every day at hour 14. And again, this would be 24-hour format. So hour 14 would just be 2 p.m. So maybe every day at 2 p.m. this would run. But let's actually just delete that, and let's just keep it focused on every minute. So for the event that would have to happen for this trigger to occur would be a message received. Now we can also specify filters here. So if I want to click add filter, I could say, okay, I only want to receive emails from specific senders, or maybe I could do a search for, maybe trigger this if I find an email that has an attachment, and so on. I'm going to leave it as blank. So I'm going to leave it just like this every minute connected to my Gmail account. And I'm going to say fetch a test event. So this will grab some emails received to my email account. And just like that, the latest email I got was you allowed n8n cloud access to some of your Google account data. We can see different fields here. It grabbed an ID, the thread ID, a snippet of the email. It grabbed the payload, the size it estimated as. I also have a few other interesting things such as the labels applied. We have our internal date, the subject, and then who it's from, and then the email it's to. And just like that, we can see it's working. It's linked to my Gmail account, and I was able to grab some data. So if I click back to Canvas, I now have a trigger that is successfully set up. So whenever someone sends me an email, something will happen. Now, of course, it's not going to work right away because I would need to turn this workflow on. So if I clicked activate workflow, well, now it's activated. I'm going to click on got it. So that means whenever someone sends me an email to that Gmail account, this workflow would run. Now, of course, there's no actions happening here, but it would execute the workflow. So if I click execute workflow, it would run, but nothing happens. So if I actually want something to happen when someone sends me an email, I would need to click on this plus icon and add another node. So that's where I would add my first action node, or my action step rather. There's not a lot to talk about with them, but there are a lot of different applications that you could trigger on. So n8n has a wide grasp of applications that they allow. So if there's anything you need to automate, there's a good chance you can do so with n8n. All right, I'll see you in the next video where we'll expand on this and start adding some action nodes to this workflow. I'll see you there.